Many hours of talking to Jeremy, who found it difficult to escape his biographer. We began by discussing each story in outline so that I understood his perspective on it, and I then researched each one in detail. Over the course of writing the book, this meant interviewing almost 200 eyewitnesses, including all the prime ministers whom Jeremy served, together with many of the other ministers, civil servants, and special advisers with whom he worked, as well as his business contacts, family and friends. Many interviewees also shared personal papers and diaries, and later commented on draft chapters. Jeremy sent me texts, giving me his view of what I needed to cover in these interviews, unable to resist a little back-seat driving, and would quiz me on my findings when I returned from each one. His text before my interview with David Cameron is a good example of his interventions, and while perhaps not typical of those sent between spouses, it was very useful. It read as follows. For DC, early days with Lamont, Black Wednesday, JH-DC relationship, first few days as PM, role of JH and Gus, decision to keep JH, initial decisions on fiscal consolidation, constructive challenge to HMT on pace of cuts, worries about monetary tightness, Leveson, appointment as CAB Sec, NHS pause, why did we get it so wrong? Pfizer/AZ, BAE/Airbus, aircraft carriers, decision to call referendum and failure to talk about immigration, Bob Kerslake decision, reflections on civil service, no contingency planning on Scotland and Brexit, Snowden, DRIPA, etc. In doing my research, I also drew on my journals, Jeremy's personal documents and letters, and some of the books published about these years. Once this work was done, Jeremy reviewed each section of the draft text, which inevitably led to further questions and iterations. Given that the purpose of this narrative is to share what Jeremy thought and what it was like to play his role, I've allowed the story to unfold over time rather than packaging it into themes. It also doesn't attempt to cover in detail issues in which he was only peripherally involved, even if they were of national importance. I've tried where I can to tell this tale through conversations. These, though as accurate as possible, with the exception of removing the profanities common in political life, are, of course, recreated, but they were all reviewed by Jeremy, and many were also checked by the other participants. To avoid dizzying the reader with names, I haven't attempted to list in the text all the people who worked alongside Jeremy on each issue, and I've also largely dispensed with titles, since they were rarely used in daily dialogue. I hope I will be forgiven for all of this. Some have noted that this book is kind, at least compared to many political biographies. This, however, reflects how Jeremy thought. In all our conversations, he rarely criticised his colleagues or the politicians he served. Jeremy's focus was instead always on the policy, developing it in line with the minister's aims and getting it delivered. Occasionally, these stories came with a raised eyebrow or a slight smile as he described the behaviours he had to manage, but never more. Other people have pointed out that a biography written by a spouse is unusual, and indeed it is. One eminent biographer even told me there should probably be a law against it. My response to this was to write faster and more furiously. Yes, there are biases, as there are in any autobiography, though I assured Jeremy this would be no hagiography. Our relationship also means that I have left it to others to judge Jeremy's contribution to our country during his lifetime in office, and indeed what difference he might have made to later crises, such as the coronavirus epidemic in 2020. There are, however, insights included here that only a spouse could have, particularly one who once worked in the same place, and who, through most of the period concerned, was discussing these events daily with her subject. There are many questions that I pondered as this book evolved. How much should the civil service change to accommodate different administrations? When is it right for leaders to defend their staff, and when should they let them go? What role should special advisers play, and how should the